people like me. You need people like me so you can point your f***ing fingers and say, that's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy.
News.
I think it's massive. Yeah, we're going to be headlining. I know it's headlining by default, but it's the big nights, and the pressure can get to you if you don't know how to deal with it. So I think it's important that I remember that I've been here and done it many a times, and I got to use that to my advantage and really go out there and from round one really set the pace and let her know that she's not in the ring with a pushover, really.
Experience is important. Experience matters. Oddly enough, Terry Harper is about 2 years younger than Rhiannon Dixon, 2 years, but she is the vastly more experienced fighter of the two. 18 professional bouts to Rhiannon Dixon's 10. A former champion at two weights, 130 and subsequently 154, now vying to become a champion at 135. Coming off that knockout loss to Sandy Ryan, you do have to wonder what kind of headspace young Terry Harper is in. Is she riding high? Is she as confident as she should be ahead of this world title fight that reads a lot like a sink-or-swim fight? Sporting a professional record of 14 wins with 2 losses, 2 draws, 6 knockouts, having been knocked out 2 times in 18 professional bouts. To Rhiannon Dixon's unblemished record of 10 wins with no losses, no draws, 1 recorded knockout, only 1 recorded knockout. Rhiannon Dixon may be 2 years older than Terry Harper, but comparatively, she's the fresher fighter of the two. She's not as weathered as Terry. Not as war-torn. The defending champion in this upcoming battle, WBO champion, one of 3 champions in today's lightweight division. There's Rhiannon, there's Beatriz Ferreira, and of course, Katie Taylor, who still holds 1 or 2 titles in the lightweight division that she may or may not soon give up. It all depends on what happens with Amanda. Another story, and back to this fight that is set to go down later on this month on the 28th, rescheduled a number of times. Initially, it was supposed to go down on the undercard of Jack Catterall versus Regis Prograis, but Jack got injured, so they had to move it. And when they moved it to Dalton Smith's undercard, but then Dalton Smith got injured. So it was moved to the undercard of Johnny Fisher's next fight, but Johnny Fisher got injured. And now these two are headlining. The edge and experience must so obviously go to Terry Harper. She's more experienced. Edge and experience to Terry. Edge and speed and sharpness has to go to Rhiannon. She's fast. Very fast. Bam, mid-range to inside. I'd say she's better mid-range to inside than Terry Harper is. Speed has to go to Rhiannon. Strength, I would give that to Terry. I would. But I don't know how strong Terry's going to be dropping down from 147 to 135. Durability is a toss-up too. Durability is a toss-up as well. As good and experienced as Terry Harper is, once again, dropping down from welter down to lightweight, I don't know how durable she's going to be. Though at the same time, Rhiannon, I don't know how durable she is either. I don't know how much she can take. This is a big step up for her. If she's pushed, I don't know how much she can handle. She's the defending champion in this thing. Rhiannon Dixon is a southpaw, where Terry Harper is an orthodox fighter. Terry leads with her left to set up her right. Terry shows a good jab, very good jab from the outside coming in, as Terry Harper's best punches are her straight punches more than her bent arm punches, her hooks or uppercuts. She's textbook like that, Terry. Everything she throws is off the jab. But Rhiannon Dixon being a southpaw, leading with her right, moving to her right, she can stay just on the outside of Terry's orthodox jab to set up either the straight left hand or the right hook. As Terry jabs, Rhiannon can slip right to fire the straight left down the pipe, down the middle, or she can slip and hook. Slip the jab and bring the right hand over, the right hook, bounce it off Terry's head. Terry's more experienced than Rhiannon, but Rhiannon has several ways to win.
Dixon!
A spunky character, I am leaning a bit more towards Rhiannon to win this thing than I am Terry. Though irrespective of who wins, whoever wins, the winner of the fight should look to fight Canada's own Jessica Kamara.
Jessica's got a secondary version of a WBA title that could see her elevated to full WBA champion. She has a fight coming up with Bonnie Hunter. I think she's going to win that fight.
Keep her version of the WBA title, and in the coming year, she may be so elevated to full WBA champion, at which point a fight between Jessica and the winner of this fight would be a unification match.
And a good fight.
Jessica Kamara has been around. She's experienced. She's won some fights, she's lost some fights, but she is an all-around good fighter, and I wouldn't mind it at all seeing Jessica swap punches with the winner of this fight.
Jessica.
So you know. Things are shaking, rattling, and rolling at 135 pounds. Further insights into what the coming year might hold. The winner of this fight might fight Jessica.
I could see that.
I'm leaning towards Rhiannon Dixon to keep her WBO title, but I ain't got a horse in the race because I'm a fan of Terry like I'm a fan of Rhiannon. I like both fighters.
But I think speed and freshness are going to win Rhiannon this fight.
Men's junior middleweight news ahead of his junior middleweight title fight. Tszyu says, I'll do what I can to make as many fights as I can. As soon as we finish this fight with Murtazaliev, we're back on to the next one. Keep the train rolling. I'm looking ahead to the next guys. Bakram Murtazaliev, then Erickson, Lubricant.
This is Tszyu's plan for a busy end of the year.
I don't mind it, because if he takes care of Bakram with relative ease, doesn't suffer any cuts, bumps, or scrapes, if he's able to come back before the year is out to squeeze in another fight, a fight with Erickson, that's all right.
And maybe that one will be in Australia, a potential Lubin fight, because the Murtazaliev fight is happening here in America, Florida specifically.
Most fighters that have the kind of marquee value that Tim has in his native Australia wouldn't spend as much time on the road as he has, fighting Terrell Gachet at the Armory in Minneapolis. That's a step down from the size crowds that he's used to. Fighting Gachet in Minneapolis, fighting Fundoria on short notice in Vegas.
Now back around Murtazaliev in Florida.
It's safe to say that Tim aspires to make a splash, a big one, in the American boxing scene, which I don't begrudge him, but what he's not calculating, what he's not factoring into it, is there are already a good number of American fighters, champions and former champions, who did not get the American populace behind them. So why would Tim think he's going to get them behind him?
Consider that Stephen Fulton was a unified champion at super bantamweight for a while, but the American populace didn't rally behind him.
And you say that, well, a lot of Americans don't watch super bantamweights, and perhaps they don't, but what about junior middleweights? What about when Jermell Charlo became a unified champion and subsequently an undisputed champion?
The American populace didn't rally behind him either.
But never mind foreign fighters that want to base themselves out of America. There are American fighters based out of America that couldn't quite become stars.
Household names.
I think Tim Tszyu's endeavor into the American boxing scene, endeavoring to become a star here and make a big splash, I think it's more trouble than it's worth. I mean, you look over across the pond, you look over at the United Kingdom, Josh Warrington would sell more in Leeds than Jermell Charlo. Hell, either of the Charlo brothers would sell in Texas.
Josh Warrington.
Johnny Fisher. Johnny Fisher has a traveling fan base that travels wherever he goes to watch him fight, and he's got more marquee value than, say, Richardson Hitchens at 140 pounds, Richard Torres at heavyweight.
That coming to America and trying to make it here when you're already an established name and a pay-per-view star, a draw in your own neck of the woods, it's more trouble than it's worth.
Perhaps Tim Tszyu and his handlers have a romanticized view of the American boxing scene. They're looking at it through rose-tinted lenses when this is not your father's era of boxing, and America is not what it used to be.
It's not.
But he's fighting Bakram Murtazaliev here in Florida, where preliminary reports suggested that Tim's next fight might be back in Australia. Apparently he's fighting Bakram here in Florida.
We've talked about that a number of times.
And provided that he makes short work of Bakram, that he doesn't suffer any cuts, bumps, or scrapes, or gashes like he did in his last fight with Sebastian Fundora, what he wants to do is cap the year off with Erickson Lubin.
They've tried to make that fight between Tim and Erickson a number of times. 2 by my count.
At least 2 times, and both times, Erickson pulled out. For one reason or another, he just didn't go through with those fights. Perhaps the 3rd time will be the charm. Does Erickson Lubin really deserve a title shot?
No, but they're using him to stay busy.
They would be, if they so decide to cap the year off with a fight against him.
Then I'm going to assume that if they were to beat Bakram and beat Lubin, the coming year, they'd move into a Fundora rematch.
They try to do a second fight with that guy. And provided that Sebastian isn't stripped of one or both of his alphabet titles, that could be a unification match.
Sebastian's got the WBC and the WBO titles. Tszyu, he's about to fight for the IBF.
If Sebastian isn't stripped of either of those 2 alphabet titles, a rematch with Tim could be for 3 of the 4 major titles at this weight. That's major.
What about that Spence fight?
There was a recent image of Errol Spence Jr. alongside newly crowned WBO welterweight champion Brian Norman.
Both fighters are managed by Adrian Clark.
As it pertains to what was supposed to be a Spence versus Fundora fight, if you look at Errol, he doesn't look like he's been training. He doesn't look like he's in any shape to fight.
Any condition.
That when you think about what's next for Sebastian, who knows if he even fights again this year? And if he does, it's not looking like it's going to be against Errol.
That while Tim is fighting Bakram Murtazaliev for his IBF, then presumably defending it against Erickson Lubin, who knows what Sebastian's going to be doing while all that is going on?
It's entirely possible he don't do nothing.
Nada.
Before Tszyu jumped into bed with the PBC, him and his team at No Limit were doing a fantastic job of keeping him busy, keeping him active. Seems they're trying to return to that.
If they can squeeze in 2 more fights with what remains of this year, because there's not a lot of time left.
Think about it. If he beats Bakram and he intends to fight Erickson before this year is out, that means he's going to go right back into camp. He'd go right back into camp after that fight.
Quick turnaround.
That is what keeps you sharp, though, isn't it? The more you do something, the better you become at it.
Sharper.
I've got nothing against that. Over to the Cruiserweight contest. The Cruiserweight unification match between the 2 champions, Gilberto Zurdo Ramirez and Chris Billam-Smith, both of which have suffered 1 loss apiece and rebounded in a big way.
Young Chris has put a lot of distance between himself and that loss he suffered well over a year ago. I think it's been 2 to Richard Riakporhe. He's 6 for 6 in his last 6, and he avenged the loss to Richard in one-sided fashion.
Zurdo is 5-1 in his last 6. He's bounced back from that lopsided loss to Dmitry Bivol. He's currently on a 2-fight winning streak, sporting a professional record of 46 wins with 1 loss, no draws, 30 knockouts, having never been knocked out in 47 professional bouts spread across the super middleweight division, the light heavyweight division, and now cruiserweight.
Masatlan.
To Chris Billam-Smith, who's the less experienced fighter of the 2, less experienced overall, less fights, sporting a professional record of 20 wins with 1 loss, no draws, 13 knockouts. He's not as experienced a fighter with as many fights or as many rounds in the bank as Zurdo, but he is the more experienced cruiserweight, if that makes sense. That Chris has only ever been a cruiserweight at cruiserweight, fighting other cruiserweights.
Not as experienced a fighter, but more experienced at cruiserweight.
I like the fight, even if it means that they are both jointly circumventing a Jai Opataya fight, which, let's be honest, is a lot more dangerous for either man than facing each other. Even if it means they're swerving that guy, going around him, it's still a great fight.
It was officially announced 2 days ago. Riyadh season
Latino night.
Chris Billam-Smith last saw action earlier this year in June, avenging his lone defeat to Richard Riakporhe in lopsided fashion. He won a unanimous decision and gave the Night Train his first professional loss. It's only right.
Night train.
Chris has amassed a respectable cruiserweight resume. I would say, looking at it, it's respectable. A win over Tommy McCarthy, Isaac Chamberlain, win over unbeaten Lawrence Okoli, win over unbeaten Richard Riakporhe.
It's respectable.
It's solid. If Chris Billam-Smith were to beat Zurdo Ramirez, that would be the 2nd world champion he will have taken an alphabet title from.
For Zurdo, it would be the third.
The third reigning world champion he will have taken an alphabet title from. Many years ago, he took the WBO title from then WBO champion Arthur Abraham. Many years later, he took the WBA title from then unbeaten Arsen Goulamarian, and now he will attempt to take Chris's title from him. If he does, that's 3 champions he took belts from.
He's a 2-division champion already.
He was a champion at 168. He's currently a reigning champion at Cruiserweight. Pound for pound talks are in order for Chris Billam-Smith if he becomes a unified champion. Not as strong an argument as Zurdo's,
but pound for pound talks are in order.
You don't often hear the names of these 2 fighters attached to a pound for pound conversation. CBS, Zurdo, it doesn't happen. But whoever wins this fight, they enter into that conversation. Chris, if he becomes a unified champion, beating the second champion he will have fought at this weight, and Zurdo, especially Zurdo, because not only is he a 2-division champion, but this would be the 3rd champion he took a belt from. And even if you don't think of him as being in that light,
it's not about what you think, it's about results.
It's about the fights the fighters actually have, under what auspices, under what circumstances. Zurdo would be deserving to enter into that conversation if he beats CBS.
Especially him.
Because Zurdo as a cruiserweight is not the same fighter that he was at super middle or light heavy. He's not just a come forward plotter anymore. He's not just a mid-range to inside volume puncher. He's moving now, boxing now, jabbing now.
He changed. Why can't you see that?
If he beats CBS, it ain't through strength of arms, it ain't through brute force, it's through boxing acumen, skills. And that's what the pound for pound list is all about.
Skills.
When he beat Arsen Goulamarian, the more experienced cruiserweight of the two, who's only ever been a cruiserweight, fighting other cruiserweights, when he beat him, it wasn't by outsizing him or just outfighting him, he was outboxing him, out-hustling him, outmaneuvering him.
He goes in there, he does to CBS what he did to Arsen. Don't deny Zurdo his plaudits.
He'd deserve the credit, and if he were to win, he'd come in the lower tier of the Ring IQ pound for pound list, the bottom bracket.
Somewhere in between 7 and 10, I'd say.
The lower tier. This card is brought to us by His Excellency Mr. Turki El Sheikh, who made the decision to not bill this as a pay-per-view, and it's cards like this, more of them, that will help to reinvigorate this boxing scene.
Oh.
Because it's not a pay-per-view, because it's more accessible to the consumer at no additional charge. You get this as part of your existing DAZN subscription. You get a great unification match that didn't take long to make.
2 champions, 2 belts.
A solid undercard with some solid fights. William Zepeda versus Tevin Farmer, Arnold Barboza versus Jose Ramirez. That's all right. For a free fight that don't cost nothing extra, that's all right.
That's solid. And more cards like this will do more to stimulate interest in the sport. I love the big-time shows, like Joshua versus Dubois, Fury versus Usyk.
I love the big-time shows. I love the big-time pay-per-views, but it's not the pay-per-views in and of themselves that keep boxing moving, that keep boxing going. It's actually the regular schedule of fights, what fighters you become familiar with.
What names get built on the regular schedule, what fights get built that go on to become big-time pay-per-views. That's where it starts.
Where it happens.
And that's where more focus needs to go into. Delivering a regular schedule filled with solid fights.
Sprinkle a few pay-per-views in between, but that's how it needs to be.